Welcome, everybody, to Grablives podcast. Thank you for listening in. I'm your host, John Vargas, and thank you for everyone who shows up to listen to this podcast. Just know that this podcast is designed to give you self-empowerment. And for those working as a firefighter, a police officer, those who've served our country as a veteran, any first responder in general, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for your support. If you can further support us, please like and subscribe our YouTube, Spotify, Apple, leave comments. This provides a method for the algorithm to continue to reach out and impact first responders as you tend to realize that these algorithms really manifest how things take place on the internet and how this message can get out to someone who needs to hear it. That really helps. So thank you so much for your support. And with our disclaimer, everything we say and do does not reflect the City of Los Angeles Fire Department. And with our sponsor and team member, Frontline Behavioral Wellness. Frontline Behavioral Wellness, they offer a 24/7 hotline. It's going to be 661-877-7241. And this is designed to have a 24/7 way of reaching first responders who need help right now. And they'll get you the help from addiction to any issues with PTSD, anxiety, depression, whatever it is. They know what's going on. They have the cultural competency to help you out. Their sister company is sarahhealth.com. You can reach out through there to figure out what they offer. If you live in the Orange County area in Southern California, that's their facility in Costa Mesa. They have a peer support group team. They have a team of clinicians. They do EMDR, whatever. They do it all. Reach out to them. They are the ones who support this podcast for us to get the proper audio, the sound, and keep it all on the platform. So thank you so much. Today's guest is going to be Morgan Englund. I had such an honor talking to him about everything he is here to do, and he's a retired LA City fireman, and he, really walked away after 14 years and just said, "I'm done." And his story, his message about why he did that is really awe-inspiring. And the stuff he does now, he does sound healing, and he gets more into how he came across that and his methods of reaching out to helping people. He's a keynote speaker and talks about his experiences and he'll talk about it more, but it was a great, phenomenal podcast episode. And those who are seeking, higher levels of consciousness and understanding how can we bring it into the fire service, understanding this angst we have inside, he talks about it. And it was such a great conversation. Thank you for listening and stay tuned. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Grablives. So I'm here with Morgan Englund. And, I always tell people before we get started in recording, it's so funny how we'll get talking before we start recording, and there's so many topics of conversation. We're like, we should be recording this right now. It's like, and we'll get to it. And, but it's so funny how that turns up. And on top of that, it's like this beautiful dynamic connection with the guests on Grablives and people's stories and stuff, and getting this message out. Everyone's here for the same cause. And I think the people who are stepping forward, especially on this podcast, is just really beneficial. And I really honor every guest that comes here. It's so special to me. I take it very seriously. And like I was telling Morgan, it's a big deal. And I make it a big deal. So thank you so much, Morgan Englund. Appreciate you, brother, for showing up, man. I know you drove about 2 hours in traffic and stuff to get here. So I would love to hear a bit more. You told me a lot about your story and stuff. But I'd love for you to kind of give it a quick intro so people get to know you. And again, we'll get started on talking about, important stuff that needs to be said and for people to hear, and so on. So thanks, man.
Yeah, right on. Stoked to be here, man. Thank you for having me.
Of course.
You're right. This is important stuff, like life-saving stuff. So Yeah, I was at LAFD for about 14 years, 13 and a half, 14 years. And I got on the job when I was 40, turned 41 in the tower like the next month.
No shit.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I think as I've looked back on it, a lot of things are becoming clear to me. And that's tough, man, being, having that much life experience and coming into a thing where, you got to change everything. You got to figure out the rules. You got to figure out all this stuff. And so, I mean, it was incredible. I mean, stuff I got to do and people I worked with. There were ups and downs for sure, but really proud of my time there and the people that I worked with. There were also some really tough things, and eventually I just got to the point where I was burnout, angry, depressed, isolated, and I just said, I was actually off duty on a double hernia operation. And the thought of going back to work was just, I was like hating it.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, well, maybe actually I called my mom. I was going to say, hey, I need to break up with my girlfriend. And what came out of my mouth was, I got to quit my job. She's like, why don't you then? I go, what do you mean? You don't quit the fire department. You don't, what? And so I started looking into that, and I just felt like I was at the point where I was existing, at a very low frequency, just getting through. And I feel like I've been given this gift of life. There's a beginning and end to it.
Yeah.
And I've lived the first 2/3 of it at least. So, what do I want to do? Am I just going to continue working until I just expire? And, yes, I'm making a difference in helping people, but I think there's a larger thing, a universal thing, that a life well lived, lived at a high frequency in joy and gratitude and love. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's what gives meaning to a life. And, when you're living at that, you're spreading that around and you're connecting people and you're connected. And so, without getting into any details, but I think just overall, I got to a point where I was like, I've given everything I can give, and to keep going I'm going to die soon. And so I made the decision to walk. I had 14 years on, so no pension. And a few months after I left, I think the reality of everything really crashed down, or the things that caused me to walk, to make that decision, really, it all became one. My childhood, it was all mixed together in this shame and guilt and feeling like failure, and so I had to really go through a healing process, because I'd really lost my voice, my ability to defend myself, which if you're at a task force house, you better know how to do that. You know how to take the shots and give them back. And I never knew those things. I was like, why would you say that?
Mm-hmm.
What are you thinking? I mean, in any other place, you wouldn't say that to another person.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it was a long, lonely journey, but I was determined to find out if it was possible to live with joy and happiness and fulfillment and abundance. Maybe not financial abundance, but I feel more abundant right now in my life than I ever have, probably. So it was a many year, 6 years of actively healing, pulling myself out of this abyss. And through that, I saw a statistic. I never talked about it with anybody. Never, I just did my own thing. But as I looked into it, the statistic that more first responders die by suicide than are killed in the line of duty was just shocked me to my core. While I was on the job, there was a girl that I knew she was having a hard time, and she reached out to me, and I was having a tough time too. And I was like, man, just suck it up. In my head, I was thinking, suck it up and keep putting one foot in front of the other. That's all I got. And I didn't pick up the phone. 2 weeks later, she put a shotgun to her head, pulled the trigger. And I think I've never gotten or thought that way particularly, but I think I've been down that low and felt that isolated. And I think that my experience, what I found out was that my experience is not individual. Clearly, it's almost epidemic, because if you got people that have won the lottery, got the best job in the world, and they're killing themselves, why? Why? Let's look at the possibilities, and these are incredible people helping hundreds and hundreds of thousands of other people. And, don't we want to protect them? Don't we want to really lift them up so that, then what do you say? Put your oxygen mask on first, right? If you're going down in a plane, it's the same thing. If we as first responders aren't healthy in mind, body, and spirit, we're not going to be able to help other people, or we will until we just crumble.
Dude, such a great introduction, man. I remember talking to you on the phone. You were telling me your story, and I know for a fact men and women have been in your shoes when they put a good amount of time, to say 10 plus years, on the job. And deep down inside, they know this job is eating at them. And they will risk and white knuckle it to where they start getting sick, and they will just keep writing it out until they hit that pension, because they have too much to lose. And it's very admirable for you to just walk away, because I would say 90% of the people will not do that. So you're one of the low percentile that took the courage to do it, because you valued your health, your mental health, your spiritual health more than anything. So I really, man, it takes great courage. You know what I mean? And this job is always preached to everyone that it's the $1 million deal, or it's the best job in the world. It's always been said. And there has to be some misnomers to that, because I think people get caught up in that, and then they're almost in the hypnotized state, thinking and believing in that, when they lose sight on themselves, their self-identity, what their values are, which should be family and health more than anything. And that all gets thrown out. And I think people are seeing that now, because right now there's just something coming to the surface right now with everything that does not resonate. It's being revealed. Like, the truth is being set free right now. And I think everyone's seeing that on a global scale, on a humanitarian scale. We're seeing that. And within the fire service, people are recognizing, okay, mental health is a big issue. Okay, but what is happening? And everyone is trying to figure this out, man. And it's too complex. I think it's way too complex for everyone to try it, especially when it's put, a lot of pressure is put on the therapists and the clinicians to figure it out. It's not up to them. I think they're very limited on what they can do. I think for me, my goal here is to bring the objectivity to self-empowerment, because it starts at a micro level to start this change. And if you don't take the responsibility and the truthful honesty with yourself to just take that inward look, it's not going to work. And it's going to have to start with the workers, the people who are, boots on the ground, as they say, to figure this out, man, and really start saying no to things, and start saying, like, you're right, my health and my family is more important than anything else. And I think that's where it's going to be shifting in so many different ways. But yeah, dude, how old are you, man?
I'm 60.
Dude, you look phenomenal, man. I was, when
pickled.
he told me you started at 40, I was like, holy shit, I was trying to do the math. But you look great, man.
So I started July, I was 40. August, I turned 41.
Yeah.
So, literally I was almost 41. So, but I want to hit a couple things that you said. So they work and they shove this shit all down inside them just to keep going, get to that pension, right? So what's the average lifespan for a firefighter after retirement? Wasn't it like 5 or 10 years or so? It's like small, right?
Yeah.
So not when you shove this stuff down, and I don't know that there's proof of this, but I know it's my truth that this stuff becomes cancer. You shove those emotions down, they become physical disease, diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, cancer. And what quality of life do you have in those 5-10 years after you've quit or retired or whatever? I've talked to several people, great careers. They had mentors, this smooth sailing all the way through, and that have retired. About 2 years after I left, a buddy of mine, a guy I worked a lot of sod with, actually we were in a band together. He was a drummer, forgot what it was called, Smoke and Mirrors or something like that. I found out that people are really, really hurting. Like they're thinking about suicide. Their wives are like, if you don't stop drinking, I'm leaving you. They're either, on alcohol, in therapy every day, or sitting there with a gun in their mouth. A significant number of people. And, those statistics aren't probably really counted. What's the lifespan after that? The quality of life after you've given your whole life to the service of others, to take that and suck it in and hold it in. It doesn't have to be that way. You don't have to die in 5 or 10 years after you retire. You could, there's ways to live at your peak, man, with purpose. And I just want to share that, I told you about this place I'd found called Runestone Ranch, hooked up with a guy named Brian Buss. And okay, let me roll back a second. So I got into public speaking. I wanted to do this. I took this course through Thought Leader, and I ended up getting selected to do a talk with them. But in the course, you have talk practice, and it's a TEDx style. You're trying to get a TEDx talk, right? Mm-hmm. So they're like, okay, you have a hook, then you have an up story, then you have a down story, and then your journey back to the main point, and bada da. So when I was at Fire Station 11, it's just brutal. Everything about it, hard and gnarly. And I used to have these recurring dreams that I was standing at an intersection in downtown LA, and there's this tidal wave coming, towering hundreds of feet above the buildings, coming through the corridors. And as it gets closer, I'm standing there, I hear this roaring sound, rah, and then I look deeper, and there's thousands of people in this wave, and they're all just gnashing their teeth and grabbing and just in agony, and I just, I wanted to just say, just be kind to each other. That it's so simple. If you could just do that. And so when they say, what do you want to talk about? They say, if you had one message to scream from the top of the mountaintop with all of humanity below you, going to act on what you said, what would it be? And that's when instantly it was like, be kind to each other. So that was going to be my point in my talk. And as you develop the talk, you pick other stories that will support that idea. And of course, my experiences in the fire department were, I was using those. So in the talk practice, I would tell some of the things that happened to me personally, nothing that I would ever say publicly, but they kept saying, you've got to tell this story. You have to tell of your experience. You have to do this because first of all, there's no way that I would do that. I'm not the guy to reveal the secrets behind the badge or this, or shame the department or anything like that. They said, but you'd be saving other people's lives. Well, finally, I did my talk about kindness, but I was still with them. And I said, well, I woke up one morning after a coaching session. I said, well, let me just see if anybody's even talking about first responders and mental health. And I found a video. This guy named Robert Arrieta, Albuquerque. I slowed the thing down. I saw the engine leaving the station. I got the name, contacted him, and we had an amazing conversation. Basically, he was talking about his overcoming his PTSD. So we had a long talk, and we connected. And then a few weeks later, he connected me with another guy named Anthony Pantoja.
What's that guy's name?
Which one?
The Albuquerque guy?
Robert Arrieta. And then Anthony connected me with he goes, you got to meet my partner, Brian. So I got on the phone with Brian. We hit it off. This guy's amazing. He's a retired cop, or he was a cop. He says, I have a 102-acre ranch. I'm starting a retreat for first responders. And I'm like, dude, I want to help out and stuff. And so he's like, well, I'm doing this, we're having our first gathering of the people that are going to be involved in creating the ranch this weekend, like tomorrow. So I threw everything in my car, went up there, camped out. And the first night after we had a dinner, I met, there were 5 or 6 guys, cops, firemen. First of all, driving up there, I was like, what am I thinking? Going up there, I'm going to be surrounded by a bunch of cops and firemen and all the macho bullshit. And I was just well, let's see how it goes. So after dinner, we kind of retired to the couches around this fire pit, and people started just telling their stories, just who I am, we're asking. And one after another, these stories, these big, strong, and sometimes tiny little people, men and women, cracking their hearts open and with truth and honesty, just saying, hey, this is where I'm at, and I'm glad to be here. And this brotherhood that I've been searching for all my life, ever since football, I think, which I thought when I was joining with the fire department, which I don't think is really the case, but we can get into that later. I found this brotherhood of people, amazing people with so much courage that I didn't have. They're out there. They've been doing this. They've been healing, and they've been reaching out saying, hey, I'm not okay. I need help. I just, I walked that road alone until that night when I realized, there really was this incredible brotherhood of people that are out there. And not only that, but this is a huge problem through all walks of life. One of the things that was really clear, became in every single story, was that their department had either let them down in some way or just outright betrayed them. And and that really made it, where they were asking for help, like after shooting somebody or, going face to face, laser beam to their head, and the guy's been, killing other people, and coming back to where, like school shooting where this woman's walking over dead children. Next time she comes to work, her hands are shaking so bad she can't even drive. She has to pull over, and she tells her department, hey, I need some, I can't work today. They're you're good. Just, suck it up, strap it on. You're good. And these people, we all know people that have killed themselves. And many of us have been down to that level. And what I think, I've thought so much about this. How can there be some shift in what we do that protects these people? And think about this. If you're, let's say you're messed up and you ask for help, or, your captain, your partner, somebody says, hey man, you need you're not okay. And the department, for whatever you're going through, said, hey man, we got you. Whatever it is, we got you. We're not going to sweep it under the rug. We're not going to deny it. We're not going to fire you. We're not going to make you a liability. We're going to heal you. And all your brothers and sisters are here for you. We got you. Then they would never have dropped down to that point where they got a gun in their mouth, ready to pull the trigger. They never would have been there because they had a brotherhood that supported them. Humans supporting each other. And I was thinking about this as a talk, as the kind of main point of the talk, is that how important it is in jobs like this where I know you got my back and you got to know that I got your back. Like, that's just a given, right? We're in situations where we just have to know that. Imagine if you walked into a 7-Eleven, let's say, and there's, people, and every one of those people, you knew they had your back. Like, no matter what went down right now, what would and they knew that you had their back. What would that world look like? If we say hello to each other, we would interact with each other. We'd be curious about each other. And so this idea is something I really want to dive into in terms of, because I think departments as a whole are not really dealing with this issue. They're putting it off. And you've got people with years of experience, people that you put hundreds of thousands of dollars into training and equipping to do their job. You're just going to let them go when you could, heal them and make them better and actually use that experience to help other people. So that's the kind of shift I feel like might be a positive thing that the leaders of all these first responder departments can maybe think about,
Yeah, for sure. There is some change right now. Me being a part of it, just as a humbling approach, because I'm more invested into the behavioral health program, especially with our union. I do see a lot of change happening. It just takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of effort from a lot of people who care, which I think is happening. It's just a slower process. That's the only thing it's taking some time, and it needs some patience from everyone, because, we tend to also put a lot of blame on everything else. And administrative betrayal seems to be this up and coming percentile of what people are saying with what affects them. And I think it's been known, there's been the research and stuff where we're taking these polls when we're going to these conferences and things like that, and it seems to be the number one thing. I partly believe in that, and I also think that if you're putting yourself in a place of victimhood with that, which ultimately puts you at a level of self-disempowerment with that. Because when you blame everything outside of yourself, you're not still taking ownership. And betrayal is a two-part process. Everything is still a reflection of what's being inward. And not saying that, in your generation, things were not taken care of properly, for sure. And so I do think that, and this is just my perspective on the grander view, and when you're talking to me about this dream you had, man, like of the city of Los Angeles, like coming with this tidal wave of these gnashing of teeth, and that's a real perspective, because if you're a firefighter and you're a paramedic working in the middle of downtown or anywhere in the city, really, this is like the underworld we're inhabiting, and we feel that. It's palpable, man. When I come home from work, I've grown to be much more sensitive because of how much more in tune I am to my senses now and things beyond my five senses. I come home drained because of that. And that's a real thing. I really envisioned that, really spoke to me when you had that dream. It's crazy. But what that's a part of is the worldview we have created as a whole in this job. And your worldview is so important to your mental health, because it's a reflection still of you. And so if you go into work, and this is so super common, I've caught myself in it. I hated people going to work. I'd say, fuck people, man. I hate people. I constantly have that in my mind going to work because of the stuff we're surrounded by, just the drug of meth and fentanyl right now. It caused me to really, it disturbed my worldview. And it made me feel disgusted by humanity. And that had affected my mental health after working with one of my teachers and speaking to me on one of the things that's been a catalyst for me is that, and that affects my mental health. And so I really had to take a hard look at that one and really decipher, okay, well, yeah, that's a big deal. I can't just hate people, because in the end, that's going to in turn show me a lot, and it's going to show up in the way I treat people. And it truly didn't show me how to treat people with kindness, because I just saw them as, even looking at, let's say, a transient or homeless person, and now we term it as an unhoused Angelonian, you know what I mean? Making these terms up, right?
Yeah.
But in essence, like, I hated homeless people. I just did, because of the way they trashed the city, the way, they would just do shit to our stations. They just defecate all over the station, and it just ruined the city, really. But I had to take a look at that one, and I had to realize, okay, my sense of compassion has been hardened and calloused because of this, but I can't let that affect me. if something on my outside world is hitting at the core of my being somehow, that's still a reflection of me. That's something I have to look at, and I have to stick to what's my own stuff. And it's a great topic, man. And I think this comes from this position in what's happening on this planet, and it's hate versus hate, and that's what we've been seeing for the tons of time for right now. As far as history has been written, it's been hate versus hate, and that's a worldview. That's a history view of what's going on. In reality, if you are in tune to the frequency of things, that it's all about a love versus war thing. Because love and war is a juxtaposition. It's two opposites with opposing views coming at an angle. But ultimately, if you go on a frequency scale, love overcomes all. It's the highest frequency of everything. It's what is manifest with how the world is created. And it's really disturbed the way we even treat this planet, the way we treat each other, the way we show up in our lives, and it's a super fascinating thing. It's been something that's really been upon my heart recently. And I'm glad you brought it up, because it's a big deal. And the fact that you are pivoting on the fact of using kindness as your method of healing is so phenomenal, because it's hard to do. It's so hard to do. But I remember when I was a rookie, I remember someone telling me, hey man, this year is going to be super difficult. The best thing you can do is to kill people with kindness. And I had used that method when people would treat me with disrespect or the way they would talk to me, and I did that. People freeze.
Yeah.
When you treat them with kindness.
No, they don't
know what to do.
Yeah, they don't know what to do. It's
You know what I mean?
it short circuits them. Yeah.
Yeah. So I remember I had an apparatus operator who he went through a lot at the time, and he treated me like shit, man.
Oh, well,
the way he talked to me.
You really an AO treating you like shit?
No, and that's okay, and what's funny is when I did treat him with kindness, he froze up and like a son of a bitch, dude. And it was so hilarious. And then at some point I kept doing it, and we started laughing one time.
That's awesome.
Because he saw what I was doing, and he knew how smart I was to do that. And in the end, we started joking around and enjoying each other's company. But I had to break him first with the kindness.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's interesting. I want to dive into something you said about betrayal.
Oh, yeah.
And becoming the victim. I mean, that's why it's such a tough issue. Like, let's say if I'm talking to department heads, whatever, chiefs, battalion chiefs, in let's say a talk, right? How do you say this stuff without blaming? Because that's what's more important to me than anything, is that it doesn't come across as I'm laying blame. I take responsibility for there are also things that I saw and things that I experienced that just were and still are. So, and also your time right now, I can't even imagine with the COVID and then with all the fentanyl and stuff, and it's
wild.
It must be insane.
It's wild.
But that's a really tough, it's a really tough thing to solve, where you don't want to sound like you're being a little bitch. You don't want to sound like you're a victim. I don't feel like a victim, but what I do feel like is there are things that we can do to take the statistics that more first responders die by suicide than killed in the line of duty, and change those. And I think if people are, I think that's something that we can do. Like you're saying, one person at a time, as we collect and more together, and over time, a greater understanding and a greater, we're talking about feelings, you're taking these feelings on with the patients you have and the people that you come in contact with. And I mean, how many times you have that conversation where you're wiping down the rigs and you start talking about, well, I leave my feelings on the sidewalk, or I leave mine at home before I come to work. And I'll never forget this one time. That's right. What we were doing, wiping down the truck. We just finished. We're kind of standing in a circle. And it was one of those things. One guy says, yeah, I leave mine at home. I leave mine. It came to me and they're all looking at me. And I go like, I feel everything. I can imagine that. They're like, oh God, there he goes again. And, I was a round peg in a square hole. It just wasn't the way I thought. The things that I said, they weren't firefighter approved for the. So it was. I take responsibility for that. That's I didn't have the tools really to be really successful, I think, in my interactions, especially in the type of, especially in a task force environment, an LA City task force environment. So, yeah, I just want to make sure that what I'm saying is not, that I'm taking responsibility for myself, and that it's really about searching for an answer and something that we can implement that can change that statistic.
Yeah, no, my perspective was more so my recent reflections of that, because it was something to look at for sure. And I think we still have to stand up for what's right. That's the factor that's changing, that changes that perspective. And I think when we are doing this introspective of why does that bother me? Why am I being affected? Because ultimately, if I'm affected by something, it's something I got to look at and take a little bit of a closer look at. And that's important. I think everyone has to do that at some point. And it's because it's becoming a very eclectic viewpoint. You go into a fire engine and you put your headphones on and you're listening to your supervisor. A lot of times they're constantly MFing the agency, this, that, or you got dispatch this. And it's like, dude, it's so negative, man. It's contagious. Yeah. And so that leadership role of that constant collective idea or concept or viewpoint is gonna spread to the other people in the fire engine, the rookie. Right.
Well, let me ask you something. Yeah. Sorry,
no, you're good, brother.
Okay. Yeah. So a couple of my guys, good friends of mine, I've talked to recently. They've become captains, and I asked them, "What training did you have in leadership? Or what training did you have after you made captain? You promoted. What does that look like? And what they told me was that." You're trained in the logistics and running a fire and all that kind of stuff. But there is no leadership training. There's an elective training that you can do that you have to do off duty, non-paid, on your own time. And as I'm looking back, I think the captain position is such an important position because you guys are all alone in that station. The captain sets the tone for the station. If you got an AO, those firemen, then AO, and that friction between firefighters and paramedics and stuff, and now he becomes a captain, what's changed? Nothing. In terms of he's still a worker, basically, and now he's leading a team. Leadership is a completely different position.
Oh, for sure.
Completely different position.
Yeah.
And that's why we keep them apart. We don't tell the guy, we handle our stuff. We don't go to the front office, But what comes down from the front office really dictates the tone of how this person's going to be treated, how that person's going to be treated, how we're collectively working together. And so I think that could, that type of thing, that's really important.
Yeah.
It's important to know how to manage a team. I don't know how to do it, but if I were going to be a leader, I would really want to know what makes a good leader, what makes an effective leader, Just running companies out of fire. I mean, we can all figure that out, but to lead people, to find their strengths in each one and meld that into one being, that's genius, man. That's to me, that's what an incredible leader is. And in the absence of that, it's the lunatics running the asylum kind of.
Yeah. No, you make a good point. And, leadership is a great benefactor to what we do, and that definition of leadership really is in the eye of the beholder, because I don't see someone sitting in the front office or sitting in the front seat as a leader per se, necessarily just because they have, a couple badges on their collar. I see people who are authentic and sovereign as leaders, and who those people are when you come across them in your life. You really do. It's palpable and you can feel it, man. You know that person. is just coming from a different space within themselves, you know, and it speaks volume. The leadership position is just a position. And for a lot of people, it's just a performance. It's a performance act. I always have this thing I say on a call or whatever, I call it ACT. You know, a lot of times it's when you have a patient who's acting hysterical and like there's nothing wrong with them. Everything's benign. It's ACT, man. You know, it becomes an act. Right. And you're on this grand stage, and sometimes that performance is actually an identity crisis for that person, and they don't even know it. And it's quite something when you're in this arena of human behavior, when you're witnessing that. But when there's an authoritarian position and there's like a lot of poor quality in that, and they use that to their ability to maneuver and manipulate, that's where things start to really strike home. It can be soul splintering for some people. I've had leaders in the years that I've done this job that they determine the energy of what's going on and the agendas that's going on, and everyone hates that person, and they know it, and they still will use that against other people. I take that personally for sure, and that's when you really have to just take your shit and go to a different station. This
was one of my, this was very difficult. Everyone, they tell me, dude, you got to get out of here. Like the way they're treating you, stuff like go to a single engine house. And I'm like, I was just too hard headed. I just work harder, which, it never worked. But I didn't want to go to a single engine. I wanted to be in the shit. I wanted to be on the truck. It's fun to pull hose, but that's where I wanted to be, on the roof, on the truck. And so I'm sure that, again, taking responsibility, I could have made my life easier. But I'm too hard-headed.
Yeah. And I do love how you have this greater perspective, because your generation was, how long have you been off for
it's
now?
Been a little over 17, so
okay, yeah,
7 years.
So you definitely came from a different generation of because there's a lot of change happening now.
Oh,
there's a ton of change happening in the department, and I came in on the butt end of that change.
When did you get on?
2017.
Oh, that's right, when I left.
So
February.
I came on when there was a big culture change, and I was treated half and half with kindness and with good people, and the other half was with people really just taking the knife and twisting it.
Yeah.
And so along with that, and that's okay, I knew myself prior, that being a firefighter didn't take my identity from me. But people that are younger than me, because I got on a little bit older, people who are younger, they don't know, they don't understand. They're trying to survive within a culture, so, but it's interesting to witness, and I'm not putting any blame on anyone or anything like that, talking mad shit, man. But this is personal experience,
Yeah, I think there's another thing that we could, what I saw, what I could say would benefit the department as a whole and the individual members, and that is that the military, when you go through boot camp, they break you down to not all the habits, all the things you thought, and they break it down, and then they build you back. They build you back up.
Yeah.
And that's the key ingredient. They build you back up. And I think that we could focus, just as first responder, I think it all walks in the building up part. Like there's not weakness in that. There's great strength in, hey man, you've passed your test. You know how to throw a ladder. Like we're good there. You don't have to keep proving it every day you come back to work. We're good. We can move on from there. We can build you up. And I think that that's true for some people, that they have that experience where they have mentors and things that, or in places and crews where they're really elevated. And I felt it myself at times. But I think that's an element sometimes that's missing in this world, is that we do the opposite of it. We look for the weakness and we exploit it. We shame people, and how does that make a good team? How does that connect us and make us stronger and make us one being, So I'd really love to see that for other people, for the people coming on. And look, it's just a tough job. I mean, you got to go through the gauntlet. You got to be able to handle the stress. You got to be able to handle I know what it's all about, making sure that you're mentally strong and all that stuff. Yeah, that's all important. But at some point, if you've proven yourself to a certain degree, there's to a certain level. And I just feel like you want to lift people up, make them confident in the job that they're doing and the job that they're doing to help other people. I think that's missing sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. It definitely needs improvement. We can definitely make that an emphasis, man. That's a part of what we're going through right now. And because of the severing of the unification is a huge part, especially after the lockdown. And it's been mentioned many of times on different episodes that is one of the key factors on improving. We have to come together as a unit. It has to be that, because that family factor is so valuable, man. I definitely want to shift into your story on healing, man, and your path of healing. It does take some time, because of where you were at the level you're at, to go into healing, especially in this type of job when you were just fixated on the job and you've lost this perspective on your health. You really have to go a lot backwards, man. And it's a deep work, and it takes a lot of courage and a lot of guts to do it. And it takes a lot of time and patience. So that's so valuable. I know you told me a little bit about how you started shifting bit by bit. But I'd love to hear your perspective, man, on how that showed up for you, what came up for you, because this is what this is all about, is everyone's story on how they did it, how they got to balance. Because ultimately, that's where this is. It's like healing is like a term that's used and it's thrown out there, but it's about coming into balance, harmony, and resonance within, a different state to where you feel at peace, to where you can put and rest your head on your pillow at night and fall asleep. Because ultimately, that's where you're at. You can feel up inward peace and you feel good in your body and in your mental health. It takes time, but yeah, brother, if you don't mind sharing.
Well, like I said, it was some time after I'd left the department where I started to really realize, and I started to actually circle down really far. I had multiple injuries on the job and surgeries and stuff like that. And after I left, I started taking those pain pills like pretty consistently. I didn't drink or anything, never really did, but I was in physical pain, but I think the emotional, mental stuff was shutting that down. And I realized, I'm like, dude, what am I doing? I can't do this. Can't sustain. I'm living at a really low level. And so I just cold turkeyed it. I just said, I'm done. I'm not going to do this anymore. And this couple days after that, I really hit the lowest point of my life. And I just got in my car, sat there for a couple hours, and then I started driving, going north on the 101. And I couldn't see tomorrow. Like, I didn't have a plan to kill myself or anything, but I felt completely hopeless, completely worthless. Yeah, it was the lowest day of my life. And surprisingly, my mother called me while I was driving, and we'd been pretty much estranged for the last 10 years or so and didn't talk that much. And I didn't even know if she could call me anymore because it was still, she never did. And anyway, she called me. She said, and she heard my voice. She said, come over. And I'm like, no, I'm not coming over today. And I kept driving, and just tears streamed down my face, like begging God for an answer. And she called me again. She goes, are you on your way over? I said, no, I'm not coming. And then I found myself on this dirt out overlooking the mountains to turn out. And phone rings again. Sure, she's already coming over. And I thought, well, I might never see her again. She's 91. I don't know. I can't see tomorrow. Like, I don't know what that means. I don't even know what it means right now, but I couldn't see myself alive the next day. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'll come by. So I drove over there, and she came in, kissed her on the forehead, sat by the window, and she didn't say anything. And I just broke, man. I just cracked open, like just whoosh. And I was just sobbing. I've never done that in my life like that. I had no control over it. And somehow she got up and she came over, she put her hand on my shoulder, and until I, kind of calmed down. And then she motioned for me to follow her into the bathroom, where she had some warm water running, and she splashed it on my face. Then she had a towel ready, and then she led me into the dining room. She had a fresh cut cucumbers and tomatoes with olive oil, and just, really right from the earth food. And I took one bite of that cucumber. It's like life just flooded back into my mouth. And so it was kind of like going down to the bottom and then the first step back up out. And so from that moment, that's when I think my healing began. And I sought out gurus and shamans, and I tried all different things. And each thing pulled me a little bit further. And then I was driving with my sister in North Carolina. She'd moved out there, and I was in the passenger seat, and I'm just white knuckling it. She's driving on the freeway, right next, just sitting there right next to a big rig. I'm like, either speed up or slow down, or, and then an intersection, I'm just like, hey, watch out for this and that. She just looks at me. She's like, you're fucked up. I went, what do you mean? So get back to LA, and she calls me and says, show up at this address tomorrow, and don't drink the night before, and wear comfortable clothes. So I'm like, all right, whatever. So I show up, and there's this guy. He's got a big beard, and talk for a little bit, and he's real shaman-y kind of thing, and ex-Israeli military or special forces actually. But his journey was that he did some gnarly stuff. He was in New York selling drugs, doing drugs, and he found this guy who was a sound healer, guy that had done a lot of work. Harvard emeritus professor in ethnomusicology. He's been working with Johns Hopkins and working with magic mushrooms, psilocybin, MDMA, to some of the other things that they're working with for veterans with PTSD. And so this guy did this sound session with me, including, Tibetan singing bowls, gong, buffalo drum, different overtonal instruments. So they have an array of frequencies, like the bowls and the gong, or drone instruments or percussive instruments. And each instrument, so we talked for a little bit. He gave me some capsules, which he told me were the magic mushrooms, and then some other things, which are some MDMA. We can talk about how those work in a minute, but, I laid down and does some meditation thing, and he starts in one instrument. And through this 4, 5, 6 hour session, it was like peeling layers of an onion off, like each layer of whatever trauma from childhood, from life, from the fire department, whatever it was, I don't know. But each instrument he'd play for maybe, I don't know, half an hour or something. And then there would be like a 2-minute silence, and then another instrument would come in. So for instance, if let's say he's playing the gong or the buffalo drum, and it's these frequencies, the traumas that we have a frequency. So when a certain frequency meets that frequency, it, literally my body would start like clenching, and then it would start shaking, and then like full on seizure activity. But my mind was totally calm and separate from it. It was just able to see what my body was holding, what it was releasing. And at one point I saw like a Rolodex of faces, and I knew that this was death leaving my body. This is the time when I was on full on like convulsions. And then there's this, and by staying on that frequency, whatever that thing that's causing it, by staying on long enough, it finally, my hands started to unclench and relax. Breathing started to slow. And then eventually I'm lying there with the same frequency, completely at peace, completely, cleaned of that, whatever that was. And then in the next instrument would reveal something else. And all I can tell you is that the next day, all of it was gone. This heavy 500 pounds of weight I felt like I was carrying, where it's like, just to get off the couch, you have to make a decision. Is it worth it? The gray world I was walking through, the next day was just gone. These fears that I developed, like with my sister, and being out of control and seeing all the things that could happen and almost being paralyzed with fear, it was just gone. All of it was gone. And I've since then went to the training to do this. It was like 12 hours a day, 8 straight days with 25 of the most brilliant or smartest people I've ever been around, like physicists, electrical engineers, and, stuff like really smart people that are diving into this frequency and every part of us, every animate object has a frequency. So, our organs and things. But the idea behind this is that if you have cells that are diseased or injured, they're vibrating at an injured or diseased frequency. And when these other frequency, whatever that key is that unlocks it or brings it back into a healthy frequency so that it regenerates healthy cells. And this idea of the sound is one thing in particular, as far as the reason why they give you the psychedelics. They're very specific. What's legal right now, I understand, is ketamine. You can have a license, and people are doing it for trauma with ketamine. When I talked to them, what they said was that what the ketamine does is it your amygdala, your fear center, like you have that trauma wants to come up, that's going to shut it down because it's too much.
It's disassociative.
Right. So the ketamine or the MDMA potentially way better shuts that fear center down. So it's allowed to come out, and only by coming out, getting through to the other side, it's just gone. You don't need 30 years of therapy. It's gone in half an hour, that piece. And then the psilocybin, it's the studies they're doing with that, with the neuroplasticity, where, it's realigning the grooves in your brain to a healthy place. So, long way to go with the study of all this stuff. But for me, it was everything helped a little bit. That fixed me, I would say.
Dude, what a great story, man. And I'm sure when you learn about this stuff, you continuously learn and grow.
Oh yeah.
And become more advanced. And, I have had my fair share of going to sound baths, and Haley, my girlfriend, she has sound bowls in our house. And I have a set of tuning forks.
Oh yeah.
That are really, really expensive. And they're definitely, if you get tuning forks, you want to get the really good kind, that's not cheap. But this woman's book I had read was about tuning the biofield, and I started really understanding frequency on a sound level. And she really goes in depth to understand how this stuff works. And she measures like your biofield. You have this electromagnetic field extending out of your body. And this is something that's beyond our 5 senses that we don't ever want to acknowledge. And because if we're cut off, we don't attune to it. We don't understand what's going on. But, she basically describes that, when you cut a tree down and you see like the layers, and it shows how old that tree is, that's the same response of how our biofield is created. And so she takes these tuning forks and will actually stand 6 feet away from you, and will hit a tuning fork, and it'll resonate at a year of which you were traumatized, and it'll attune that layer, that frequency to the tuning fork, because essentially everything is frequency, everything
Yeah.
is vibration.
Yep.
And down to a cellular subatomic level, that's how things operate. And so if there's some distortion or there's something that's out of balance, all you have to do is like the intelligence of your body will attune to something that's out of sound because it's all frequency. So it's pretty interesting the way she had described it and the way she goes about it. And I had Haley do this sound thing on me where she took each bowl that was in resonance with the energy centers of my body.
The chakra type things, yeah.
So she was moving energy up my body, and she came down to my solar plexus, which is like in the middle of my stomach. And there is this emotion that came up. I was just like, I need to scream right now. And she's like, go scream. And I went to go on a pillow and I screamed it out. It was just so interesting that the emotions, the thoughts, the memories that came forth through this experience was so extreme, and it was so beautiful at the same time. It was cool because, my girlfriend, she knows about this stuff, but to see me go through an experience of being in process of something, through that is pretty tremendous. And I know when people I know MDMA was getting pushed with the FDA to have it approved for treatment and things like that. And it was disapproved recently. And a lot of people were up in arms like, dude, all the veterans or people for helping veterans work through PTSD and things like that were like, what the fuck, dude? Like, this has been helping people. And the clear note around that is that, people are going to do it no matter what, because it works.
Yeah.
And there's an agenda right now where any type of pharmaceutical company is going to try to disband it.
Oh,
because it helps people.
For sure. Yeah.
That's the brutal honesty.
This is actual cure.
Yeah.
I mean, I can only speak for myself, but this is like a cure. And when I saw that this was so life-changing, if not life-saving,
right,
I was like, man, I'm all in. And, but, especially as first responders, I mean, how many even first responders are even open to the idea of that? I mean, we're all, it's anti-drug and all that stuff, but this is not, let's talk about medicines. These medicines that they advertise on television, 4 out of 5 commercials, is some kind of medicine that's supposed to help you, right? But do they help you? No. They mask the symptoms. They create other issues that you need other drugs to take for. It's just money. They're just after the, and we've known that since forever. So, God, I lost my train of thought there. But this stuff, this is actual medicine. Like mushrooms, God made those, or whoever you believe in. You can't patent it. It is what it is, and it's incredibly healing. And honestly, mushrooms. Okay. So when I was going through, part of what led me to all this, I was really going through this kind of almost out of body experience. And I met this neighbor. He had a daughter who was from Sri Lanka, and we just started talking. And I was getting into finding out, sound and the Hindu religion. I mean, this is thousands of years old with the sound and everything. We're just coming to it now. But he gave me a book. This guy, Living in a Mindful Universe. Eben something, I'll think of it. But it's about this guy is a brain surgeon. He's a neurosurgeon. And he gets this form of meningitis that it's almost impossible to get as a human, as an adult, unless it's physically inserted into your head by accident or something, like a dirty needle. So he gets that. That's first miracle, right? Then he goes into a coma of which there's no way out. And if he by some miracle did make it out of the coma, he would be a vegetable. So he makes full recovery. But while he's in the coma, he has this near-death experience where he's met by a guide. He's seen this light. He felt this incredible love, like unexplainable love. And as he's telling this story, I had done at a different time some type of psychedelic, and what was revealed to me was kind of just the truth about. Hang on. He was saying that near-death experience He's investigating through the book how he could possibly have it when he knows everything he's learned and experienced. There's no way that could happen. It'd just be blackness, but yet he had it. So in his investigation, part of it, they go and they study people on psychedelics, and you'd expect the neocortex to light up. You know, you're having all these hallucinations and all that stuff, but what they found was dormant, just went almost completely dormant. And what he surmised out of that was that what he saw, that near-death experience, that's like universal knowledge, or it's Akashic record. It's knowledge that we don't, as humans, we don't have access to. So you're shown something like a truth, right? And as I was saying, my experience on the psychedelics that I was on that one time, it was the same. I felt that love. I was shown things and beyond our understanding. And so the neocortex, part of it makes us human. It gives us all human emotions and everything, but it's also a filter. It's a filter that dumbs us down. It filters or blocks us from receiving that kind of knowledge. Mm-hmm. And so when you experience this, it's kind of a look behind the curtain of what's really going on. You know, from outside of this tiny little world we think we live in, this physical world. You know, our lives, our souls. Oh man, I'm getting way too deep on this stuff, but
keep going, man.
But our lives, our souls are here, man. This energy is way before, and it's going to go way after.
Right.
We're gone. You know, it's this consciousness, and we actually supposedly move in soul groups, like 5 to 7 other people.
For sure.
So this really opened up to me, and what it seemed like to me was truth. This seemed like this makes the most sense to me of all the religion and all the things that I've studied. This seems like the most true thing.
I'm so happy you brought some of this stuff up because it's super interesting, and I've come across, you know, stuff on my own through my own out of body experiences, and you know, I've had tremendous out of body experiences just through meditation. Yeah, just try doing the proper process of, you know, going through that way of travel.
Well, as you know, like yogis, there are certain people that can access that without, but most of us can't. You know,
it's what takes practice, takes time. And luckily I had the proper guidance and mentors who teach me how to do it. You know, so now I can go into meditation, and sometimes I'll get a message of something in the future. Like for instance, this house that I live in, it came through meditation, about 8 months prior. And I was told, you're going to move on this date. And sure enough, I got the house on that same exact date. And it was just, all I did was go into a state of trust. That's what kind of graduates you through the process of going into meditation and having intuition and things like that. They say that trust is the key to the universe, because as you gain this sense of trust for yourself and through the unknown, there's something that happens through that process for yourself. And the more you practice and you chip away at it, you really become, you begin to manifest your superhuman nature, because we are phenomenal human beings. And I think we've been lied to, and we've placed trust outside of ourselves. And it's really sad, and it's been breaking humanity for quite some time. But aside from that, like the things you're saying, like these near-death experiences are crazy. You can go on YouTube and just YouTube near-death experiences and hear what people come across. And they all have a very similar experience, you know? And the fact that this guy met this being, this entity, or whatever, this higher dimensional being that was speaking to him, it could have been a higher octave of his being speaking to him from the future. You never know, because time and space doesn't operate on that level, on different realms of higher levels of consciousness. And if this goes, you know, past your belief systems and you think this is fucking crazy, go ahead and YouTube near-death experiences, and you'll see a commonality of people explaining the same exact thing. And I think people have been caught up in such a logical, scientific paradigm of living from the dawn of how that's been expressed, but that's been a limitation, you know, to what humans are capable of. And there's this fear coming up right now with artificial intelligence. And I think people are getting way too caught up in it because human beings are way more intelligent. You just lost sight on it, and you've put power outside of yourself to recognize it. So it's super interesting, the stuff you're saying, because I had met my chiropractor, who is an amazing chiropractor, and he told me he had a near-death experience. And he said that he was able to see his soul and see what souls look like
Hmm.
in this realm of an
Wow.
experience. And I never even mentioned it to him. I just told him about my traumatic brain injury that I had, and he said he had a traumatic brain injury and he was 6 years old, but he was in a coma for two weeks. And so in that experience, he was basically catapulted into an astral realm or a higher level of existence, and was speaking to entities or whatever who was teaching him how to view his life. And ever since that experience, he walks this life in a different way. And he has a very interesting technique on chiropractic care. He does not do regular crack and let you go into alignment. He does. I want to have him on the podcast because he's so interesting and intricate on how he understands the skeletal system. Really, it's almost energetic what he does. He barely taps your spinal cord and taps your body. I've sent people to him, and they come back and they're like, "Dude, who is that guy?" Because he is amazing and he's wonderful. He knows what he's doing, and he's very sovereign. But aside from that fact, going back to what you're talking about is our level of awareness. Just because we're imbued with consciousness in every part of our being, but it does not mean that you are aware. And I think when we're going back to relating this to our line of work, we are severed from that because we're just really blocked from protecting ourselves, and we're in a state of survival. How can we go and separate ourselves when we come home from that? And there's a switch you have to turn on and off and learn how to do. And it is not very easy. I still get stuck in it, dude. Like, I go to work, I come home, and I feel blocked, from my essence. And it's just from, I think a lot of it is lack of sleep too.
Yeah.
So when I come home, I have to recharge, because I know myself at an intuitive level to be in my best and show up as my best when I'm at home. So that's one of the things that I really think it's very, very difficult to show up in a job of service like this in a very busy department and come back home and then figure things out. It's very, very difficult. But going into some of these medicines, these medicines are really making just headlines for how much it's helping people get in tune to these. It's a shortcut to get in tune to these different ways of living. Yeah, and it's phenomenal.
It's 30 years therapy. Boom, done.
Yeah.
And actually works. Yeah, for sure. So
yeah, man, I think for me, my personal experience with, I think seeing people tell me their experiences and the complete turnaround and change in their life, it's phenomenal. I mean, I think from everyone basically learns the truth, and sometimes the truth really hurts, and so that brings some different perspective on people's lives when they take a substance, right? That's deemed, I guess, let's say it's demonized, right? That it's hurtful and it's gonna harm you. I think there's a balance with it for sure. I don't think it's for everyone, but I have seen some transformation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but again, what do we call medicine? And who tells what's medicine, what's a drug? The drug companies?
Yeah.
Well, we got a problem if we're getting our information there. But that's clearly because they're interested in money. So, and I've seen throughout my life, I was lucky enough to be open to this because, my mother was really artsy fartsy and it was the hippies. It was late 60s, early 70s. So, fresh juice and organic food and all that I was exposed to. And some of these healers would tell me stories about the drug companies coming after them, threatening them and stuff like that. So I've been aware of that and you can just see it. I mean, it's there for anybody to see what's happening, what they're doing, what they did with COVID. And I mean, they went like, I think Moderna went up like thousands of times, more money than they made the year before type of thing. And they really, and I don't, so we had this study on magnesium sulfate, right? For stroke, embolic stroke. everyone knows what magnesium sulfate does. You know, it relaxes the soft tissue and but it might. But and there've been is magnesium sulfate going to work differently in an ambulance than it works in a hospital? No. But can you patent it? No. So what do you think the end result of that was going to be? Not going to carry mag sulfate on the rigs. So I mean, seemed like, anyway, it's all about money. But my point is that what is a drug? What's a medicine? And who decides? We've all been told that psychedelics are drugs, bad, and they can be. But like anything like that, what's the right use for it? Where can it be beneficial? And let's compare to some of these other things, side effects and yada, yada, yada. So I'm all about things from the earth. And obviously chemicals, you can recreate that in a lab and stuff. But mushrooms are grown in the earth. I mean, we've been using, for most of our own, up until the last maybe 100 or 150 years, we've been using plants to heal ourselves.
Yeah. No, I think MDMA is pretty interesting too. I know I've read books on MDMA, which is really fascinating because I read a book by Dr. Dan Engle. I forget the name of the book he had for MDMA, but he's big on traumatic brain injury and treatment with some of these plant medicines and things like that. That's been phenomenal for traumatic brain injury. But he had a specific book on how he treats patients with MDMA. MDMA was really special to him because he was able to help walk someone through therapy because he was realizing when he would take brain scans of people, like someone who went through some severe sexual abuse, he would scan their brain and they would have the same exact brain scan as someone who had blunt trauma to the brain.
Wow.
And so he was like, okay, hold on a second here. There's something going on here with just trauma in general. And so he was treating patients with severe sexual trauma with MDMA. And he was seeing these amazing results where, you know, they were able to walk themselves through an experience that they never would want to revisit, but have a third person perspective in a way.
Exactly, because of
to see that,
that part of it where it takes that fear part. So you don't, so when it comes up, you're not experiencing, you're not experiencing it all over again. You know, when we have a memory like that, our body reacts. We release the same chemicals and all that as when it first happened. And that's why both the MDMA and the mushrooms can rewire your brain, can allow that thing to come up so you can deal with it, get it out of you. You know, something I wanted to say earlier, you'd mentioned was something you said, every call we go on, everything, it's like little hooks, little energetic hooks, that get stuck. And after a while, it weighs too much to barely walk. I think and so they're energetic hooks. So they have frequency, so they can be, healed. You can get them off you to get them out. Why would you carry that stuff around? If you had a way to get rid of all that, why wouldn't you just, I know why.
Yeah, no, I think it's preventative maintenance to go to sound healings. They're super relaxing. And I wish I went to more of them. And just hearing a giant gong go off, dude, that is like soul crushing when you hear one of those things go off. Man. It's amazing.
And not only that, but like the way you can play it, you start with a lot of times I'll start with friction mallets where you're lying there and you don't, just all of a sudden there's this, but it's subtle at first but it's just this huge rumbling, just very, and then it, you can just, and then the gong will start vibrating more and it gets louder and louder and louder. Or, there's so many ways to play it and to come up to crescendos, like the way I do it and the way that I learned to do it was this whole thing is about kind of like climbing a mountain. You go up the first part and then you kind of have a little lull and then you hit the next section, and then you have the final peak. So at the crescendo with the gong where it's just full on. And that's usually where I'll say, that's where you want to scream because you have to have some release for it. But then after that, coming in with the koshi chimes, where it's this little haunting, it's kind of happy, but a little melancholy, and it just is gentle. And you're like, oh, so it really, I call it a sound adventure because you know, they say an inner journey and all that stuff. This really is. This is a journey both in the astral plane. I love that term. It's up in the astral plane, but it's also deep in your own, that astral plane, just as deep in yourself. It's hard to explain, but it's fascinating, you know, and it teaches you about yourself. So yeah, I think it's great, and probably not for everybody, but I hope people will not be confined by what they've been taught, what they think they know, what they think the rules are. Because really, what are the rules? You know, what about taking care of yourself? This has really been, I don't know about your generation, but my generation, you know, you don't do that. You don't, self-care. Here's one part of my healing, probably the first thing that happened. I went to one of these gurus, shamans, but it turned out this tough little Irish lady, about 5 foot, like a little fire hydrant. And she's like, all right, sit down. I don't care what your story is. We're just going to get to work. And well, one of the things she did with me, she said, okay, close your eyes, and I'm going to have you count. There's a staircase, and there's 30 stairs, and you're going to walk up them, count each stair as you go up, and tell them, describe what you see. And so I'm like, okay. So I start walking up the staircase, and I get to stair 23, and she says, okay, who's waiting for you at the top? And I thought, oh, somebody waiting for me? How exciting. Wonder who it could be. And I get up, and I come level with it, and I step up, and there's this little kid, about 4 years old, bleach blonde hair, and he's just beaming with joy and life. And I realize it's me. And I was so surprised, because I would have thought he'd be beat down already, depressed. And not only that, there was so much pride in his look towards me. It didn't compute at all, you know? But it was, what I learned from that was that if anybody touched that kid, if anybody fucked with that kid, I'd kill him. You know, I would defend that kid with my life, not because it's me, because it's him, because it's a kid, right? Yeah. But that kid was me. A kid still is me. So for me, when they talk about self-love, I understand it in that way. So many times I didn't defend myself. I didn't stand up for myself. I just took it and didn't say anything, kept going on. But had that happened to this kid, my reaction would have been totally different. I said, fuck you, man. You don't talk to me like that. You don't talk to him like that. So that was when I understood about self-care, self-love. It's that child, it's what, when we're born into this world, we're pure and innocent. And, until the world starts shaping us and showing us what the rules are and everything. And if we can have the courage to realize that truth, then we can, I think, really be aware of taking care of ourselves and knowing that that kid is us still. It's just we were carrying all this other shit, So, but honor that innocence, that curiosity. My daughter, I have a little 9-year-old. She said, whatever. She goes, Daddy, I don't want to get into all this, but Daddy, I support Palestine now. I'm like, oh, why? She goes, well, this thing came on Instagram. It really, really spelled out how to do it and stuff. And her mother's, whatever, kind of going that route too. And I would kind of probably support the other side. But I just said to her, she goes, are you mad at me? She didn't want to tell me. And I said, she goes, are you mad at me? And I said, no, I'm not mad at you. I think it's really, you saw something. It seemed logical. It spelled it out in a way that made you feel that was the truth. And all I would ask is that throughout your life, you stay curious and keep an open mind, because there might be other information that you'll find that contradicts that and might seem more truthful to you. May not, but, so as a lesson in life, and as a lesson for all of us, to stay curious, to stay open, and We don't know. We know nothing, man. We know nothing. So I don't know how guys can walk around thinking, shit, I know everything. And we know nothing, man.
Yeah.
So if we're not curious and open-minded, I don't think we're living our best life.
Yeah, I mean, kids are such great teachers too. It puts you in a perspective like, hold on, I gotta make sure I'm in a teaching moment here. You know what I mean? To make sure I'm not putting my own belief systems on a child either. You know, it's like
exactly.
It's really hard. You know, sometimes. So a lot of times with my girlfriend's daughter, she's 9 as well, and I ask her questions to see what she believes. You know, and it's really interesting how what comes up out of her mouth. It's like it's so awe-inspiring. You know, and when you go back to talking about you meeting your inner child. You know that, so like going into more of like the metaphysics of how we're designed. We have these energy centers that reside within our system, and like there's something called the solar plexus, and it's a yellow energy center of that body part or that part of your design, and in that area is where your inner child resides. And so with this energy center, it operates off a wavelength that it operates with your tissues, your organs. The connective tissue, the fascia in that area. So with the emotions that are in balance and ones that are out of balance are going to correlate to how your body is fluctuating, really, is in resonance with that wavelength. But what's interesting about when it's in balance is that it harnesses your willpower of who you are. So you have a poor relationship with your inner child, or you have been severed with your inner child through, let's say child abuse or whatever, or neglect or emotional trauma. That part of you really is gonna have a hard time finding its willpower, finding its self-worth. And it's a beautiful thing to interact with your inner child in these experiences. And that's why the first time you go to a therapist, they're gonna ask the first thing they ask is like, how was your childhood? Because that's the first place to start. Because if you don't have a direct connection with that part of you, you're gonna have a really hard time discovering bits and pieces of how you operate, why you're behaving this way, why you're having these thoughts. And one of the things I was going to get at as well was suicide ideation is like this grand term, and it's not really brought into a better perspective because suicide ideation is not isolated to just having intrusive thoughts about killing yourself. It's also correlated to having thoughts of disempowerment, thoughts of saying I'm not good enough, or intrusive thoughts that constantly come through, and having thoughts of being in isolation with yourself. These are also in category of suicide ideation. And there is also behaviors that are correlated to suicide ideation as well. Disassociative behavior that leans into extreme burnout is also in relation to suicide ideation. So people get caught up like, oh, dude, I never had thoughts of killing myself. But that doesn't mean that you're still hurting inside that's going to lead you down that path later on. So I think the precursors to that, because an event that shows up in your life, sometimes the totality of that event is not actually focused and fixated on that event. And so there's things that lead up in steps and behavior and thoughts and patterns of living that lead you to that one, let's say, shell shock moment of your life. But you have to pay attention to what led you there, because that played a part in the totality of everything. So I really want people to understand that and just listen, man, with open ears about some of this stuff, because these are the topics that therapists aren't really speaking of directly. And if you go to a good therapist, they will know, and they'll tell you, hey, you were abused as a child, you were neglected, but you weren't hit.
I just found I came to that realization myself in the last few years that, there was nobody around. My mom was gone, and I raised myself pretty much. I had 3 older brothers, so that got me tough. But when I turned 10, I learned how to ride a skateboard, and I learned how to use my thumb. And from then on, that's how I got to school. That's how I got to Malibu to go surfing, 25 miles away. But I'm realizing that my perception. I'll tell you why that's funny. My perception of myself was worthless. My core truth is that you're worthless. You're not worth anything, basically.
Yeah.
So I just realized that I don't say that with any pity or victimhood. It's just that was really down at when I get down in the nitty gritty,
Yeah.
that's the true core belief about myself. And what changed my life, I was getting arrested. I got kicked out of 4 junior high schools. And then in my second year of high school, I got into football, and it changed my life completely. I mean, I had everything I didn't have before. I had this incredible father figure. It was tough, but he melded us into one person, and this was a team that was like 90. There were 4 white guys on the team. Everyone else was black from Crenshaw. But that didn't matter. The culture was the thing that was so different for us, kind of culture shock and coming together. It wasn't a racial thing at all, but very quickly we became, that's where I felt for the first time in my life, I was accepted into something greater than myself, a brotherhood, that ended abruptly for me in college when I ruptured my kidney, found out I have a horseshoe kidney. So I'm vulnerable in the front. So if I get hit, they're like, dude, if you, this is the big 8, like if you get hit here and you'll be dead before we can get to you. So that ended that, and I had to figure out, but it's like all of a sudden, something happened here in the department where you're all of a sudden not a fireman anymore. I mean, that is part of your identity, whether you want to say it or not. It really is. When you drive home and you're walking through your day at home, you're a fireman. I mean, you're wired that way, right? So, what was I talking about?
Talking about childhood and self-worth.
Right. Self-worth. So this idea of brotherhood is something I think I was chasing my whole life. And when I got in the fire department, I mean, everyone thinks you're joining this incredible brotherhood. And I was just really surprised by that whole thing about find the weakness, exploit it, especially after you've made it, after you've got, that it continues and stuff like that. So, I think I felt, I thought I was in, but what I think overall, I didn't get that feeling at all. That wasn't the empowering feeling of being part of something. I felt very isolated at times. But I'll tell you, meeting you, man, brother, and these other incredible people they're standing up for themselves, saying, no, I'm going to live, not just exist. I'm going to live at my highest frequency, and I'm going to lift other people up, as I can, however I can. Just finding this brotherhood here, people that are speaking the truth and have the courage to speak the truth. And I mean, you sitting here as an LA City fireman having these kind of conversations is mind-blowing to me. Mind-blowing. Now you can see why it was kind of a square peg in the round hole.
Dude, it happened not on my own accord, man. It happened through my own suffering at first. How to get through that part. And it wasn't an easy process, without a doubt, but looking back on it, like it's shown me so much to show up for other people. And people call me all the time, man, and I'm there for people, and I want to be an anchor for others to make sure that they know that there's someone that they could call, who's been through it. And it means a lot, man, when you can talk to someone and they've been through an experience.
It's everything.
Man.
It's everything. You were saying later when we were talking about the department and betrayals and stuff like that, and psycho people, psychotherapists, things like that. It's just the point I was trying to make was that when somebody has some event or whatever, it gets to a certain point in there where they're not okay.
Yeah.
And they have the support system around them. Support system. Support system. Yeah. Support system of people that we got you, bro. What do you need to say? What do you need to talk about? It doesn't make you any less tough. It makes you tougher. to be able to say that and then go right back out on a call and right in the middle of it, go on a call for, structure fire or a cardiac arrest, whatever it is, to me, that would be seeking strength
Right.
and really unifying people. So
Yeah, and going into back to that betrayal thing, it's a major topic. It's been brought up constantly. And when I had mentioned it to one of my teachers, she presented it to me in a different way. And I realized this is something from the core of my being that I carried as a wound from my dad. And it was a betrayal from my dad that ultimately, looking at from a man-to-man perspective, I would lean into that more. So this is from my own experience and what was brought up to me, and it was good to see that, to realize, this is something deeper, and that's what she does to me, man. She opens me up, and I get to go into the spots that I didn't want to look at, and ultimately that's what it came down to, and so that's the common theme here is the more you see how you're reacting to something or how you're responding to something. Ask yourself, and this is about emotional intelligence, ask yourself how you feel about it, okay? Because your thoughts can ramble and ramble and ramble. It's going to be like, if you put it in perspective, like a tug of war. If you're on two cliff sides and you're playing tug of war, and at the bottom there's a pit of whatever, you're going to fall into the pit most of the time. You're not going to win against your mind. And whatever you resist is going to persist. So ask yourself how you feel about that experience, about that reaction. And ultimately, you'll find out if it's anger. Okay, what's under anger? It's grief. Okay, what's under grief? It's something
Fear.
else. There's layers to it, and you're gonna find out truly at the core of your being, how you're showing up for yourself, and what's really at the core root of it. And this is something that I've had to really work at, because I noticed I've been so blocked off from my emotions, and I have a hard time connecting to them. And so this is an intention I've been having over the course of the last year and a half or so. And through that experience, I've witnessed a lot of myself in this path. And it's becoming to be really, really awe-inspiring, because now I can really know myself. Number one, I can really truly step into my power, reclaim it from having these limiting belief systems around supporting these emotions too, that were not real. You know what I mean? They were real, but the belief systems were real.
yeah,
That there were the lies, that really, because belief systems are really tricky. You know what I mean? Because they are agreements that you make without question. And when you go into these belief systems, you truly understand where they came from, the programming they arise from, and you start to understand, okay, I can reprogram this with an empowering belief system now. Like the fact that you said internally you believed you weren't worthy, but now you can replace that, say, I am worthy. I have self-worth. I believe in myself, and I stand proud. These are things that we can switch easily. And after you kind of go through this process of understanding the intelligence of who we are, you can really start to reprogram who we are and step into a different role of who you are. So the bottom line with this is it takes work. It takes work, man. And it's not easy, but if you have the proper map, you realize it's not that hard, and that's what's beautiful about this. And having these conversations is real. And me being able to relay what I'm being taught of how easy and simple it can be. It really, it can shift your life in so many different ways. And it was crazy, because I just saw that movie Inside Out too.
Yeah, me too.
Dude, they pictured it they painted the picture in such a beautiful way, right? You remember how those belief systems were like these wires,
yeah.
and like they play it like a chord, right? And it resonated all the way to the emotions
cool.
inside the brain. The same exact thing. Whoever wrote that story did such a great job, and then those bad
creating
memories.
the anxiety too. I mean, you're like, no, don't do that.
And in those memories, right? Then they shoved it to the back of the mind.
Right.
The things that were, deemed, let's say, embarrassing or negative.
We don't need those.
Right.
Yeah.
Just send it to the back of the head. But those will come back to you, man.
Yeah.
Those are really. I mean, in the movie, there's an avalanche of all those memories that came back into the pool of where the belief systems were supported, and they started creating belief systems. Right. Me and Haley, we watched that movie with Paisley, and like we looked at each other, man. This is so true, and we definitely feel all this, I think that movie is definitely for like adults.
Yeah. Oh, it was pretty deep on a lot of levels. I mean, I'm sure if I watched it again, I'd see a lot more to it. But yeah, it was interesting. And I just want to say, I don't know if I was really clear about it, but this idea of, we were talking about therapists and stuff like that, but talking to somebody that's walked in your shoes, it's night and day. It's you can tell somebody that hasn't done this, but they cannot understand. And instantly when you talk to another fireman, or firefighter, it's, there's an understanding, right away. So I want to say to you that this, whatever happened, whatever you went through, it takes so much courage to not just shove it down, suck it up, and go along with the crowd, but to be open to that, to say, hey, I'm not okay. I'm going to fix myself, or I'm going to search for something more out there because I'm not okay. You said that I had courage earlier, and I appreciate that. At the time, I didn't know if it was stupidity or courage, one of the two, But as I'm seeing other people walking out in this and saying, no, man, I'm going to heal myself, I'm going to do this. It's pretty awe-inspiring. And I just want to say to you, man, being on the job right now and doing this, and the conversations you're having, and the open mind, it's pretty phenomenal. So I applaud you in that, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's I think the more I speak openly about, my inner turmoil and my soul splintering moments, people come to me and say, hey man, I've dealt with this same experience, or I've had that a part of myself, but I didn't want to say anything, so it gives people an opportunity to open up more, and it's...
Well, this is exactly why what Robert said to me goes, by telling your story, by telling my story, you look what happened. You came up to me. The first time you tell your story and somebody comes up to you and goes, man, like you changed somebody's life, or even saved somebody's life, or you've given them the courage to say, hey, I'm not okay, man. And even if they don't go through the department, but they find whatever works for them, at least they're doing that. They're not just getting crushed and crushed and crushed and crushed each day. They're going, no more. I'm going to heal myself. I'm worth healing. And it takes a lot of courage, man. Yeah.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. If anyone needs to reach out to you and is curious about your sound healing stuff, how do they do that?
My son and I, he's incredible. He's the master sound practitioner. His name's Jackson, and we have a company website, mysticharmonies.com.
Oh, cool. And,
you can reach us there. We can set up something. We can set up a group thing or an individual thing, or even a Zoom, that works too. We got good mics and stuff like that. If you just want to try it out, give you a free 45 minutes. Because the main thing is spreading this to people and helping and lifting people up. Personally, my morganenglund.com, MRG, it's ENGLUND.com. I'm working on my public speaking and stuff. And this is just brand new because I was not going here at all, but the support that I'm getting from people for all of us to tell our stories and just be honest, no blame, no, just this is my perception. This is what worked, and being open. So I really want to, I'm a healer. I'm a first responder. I always have been in some way, and this is no different. It's just, I want to give back to incredible people that are still out there, sleep deprived, putting that out on the line. If there's anything I can do to help it. So, and then also I want to really, I want to mention Runestone Ranch again. This is going to be an amazing place. And Brian Buss, Anthony Pentoa at the Runestone Ranch. It's a gorgeous property and incredible They haven't started the actual retreat yet, but that's coming up. So if you want any information on that, just email me, come to my website, whatever. So,
Dude, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you coming here, taking the time out of your day to show up here. And yeah, if anyone is curious about sound healing, you have to do it in person. It's such a different experience in person, and you can feel it in your body, man. It's quite something. But thank you so much, brother. I really appreciate you showing up. It's a big deal, man. So thank you so much. An honor and a pleasure. As far as closing up here, I just really want to reiterate, if you guys can like and subscribe any of our stuff, it helps the algorithm when we want to get the message out to some of these people, because it's gearing around the people that are liking it and so forth, and laying in comments on the videos on YouTube or Spotify or whatever. It does help. It's so weird when I'm looking at different algorithms and stuff and the way things are showing up. It's just really strange, but it makes an emphasis on how this gets out to people who need to hear it. So that being said, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate everyone. And also our Frontline Behavioral Wellness is our team member and sponsor. They help the sound so good and keep this platform up and running. So if you want to reach out to them, they have a 24/7 hotline. It's 661-877-7241. And their clinicians and their program is designed for first responders. That's a 24/7 hotline. And if you're a spouse and you know someone who's really in need, they get you the help you need. And it could be from least invasive to most invasive, from addiction to therapy to group therapy to their own peer support group program. They are really here to help people who are in this field of work, and they have a heart for that. So reach out to them and take care.